meeting to order on Wednesday, January 25th, 2023 at 7 p.m. I have with me in the room from the board, John Zahn, Brian Solacey, James Mitchell, and Catherine Howe. The first item on the agenda is a new application. I will open the public hearing for the application of Joel Favaza, sorry if I spelled it wrong, said it wrong, Seaside Legal Solutions PC on behalf of Samuel and Drayton Martin for a variance under sections 5.6 and 7.4.6 of the zoning bylaw and other relief as may be necessary to construct a detached garage with a ridge height that exceeds the 25-foot maximum height for an accessory structure at 107 Summer Street, Assessors Map number 14, lot number 34 in District A, filed with the town clerk on December 15, 2022. Who's going to speak on this application?
Good evening, would you like me here?
Yes, that's fine.
Anyway, I'll introduce myself for the record. My name is Joel Favaza. I am an attorney at Seaside Legal Solutions with an office at 123 Main Street in Gloucester. It is up to the chair how should I proceed. I do have a PowerPoint that I can screen share to the Zoom if I was given screen share capability in the meeting.
Oh.
If it's not a possibility, we can, if someone else wants to bring up the application, I can kind of walk through the plans, but if we can get, just as the host of disabled,
Somebody go out and talk to the man out there and see if he can connect to the podium. I know we did it at another
You
meeting.
can just enable him to screen share and then I think he'll be able to do it.
Are you on Zoom on your?
I'm on
Yeah.
Zoom.
Oh, never mind.
I think he'll be able to do it.
Never mind.
Okay.
I just have to find him.
My name is Joel.
Got it. See if that works.
Sure.
Did he say anything out there?
I have no clue. It's up to you guys.
Yeah. We're in good shape.
Okay.
Beautiful. As the chair announced, I'm here on behalf of Samuel and Drayton Martin, they are trustee owners of 107 Summer Street here in Manchester. There's the slideshow. So the proposed work tonight, we are simply looking, I'll leave it as my infinite loop of. This year loop, very good. Foundation plans are covered. We're here looking to construct a new garage. It's a standalone detached garage separate from the existing home that was built in the 19th century. We are in the A zoning district, which is a single residence zoning district. This lot is conforming and the lot currently consists of a single family residence and a building. So the relief requested tonight is a variance. As this board is well aware, the maximum building height for accessory structure is either 1.5 stories or 25 feet. The height measured on this garage technically is 32.25 feet above mean construction grade. And you know that requires us to go out and survey the actual elevation of the land before construction takes place. This is not a 32.25 tall garage. It is just going to appear to be 32.25 feet above the existing grade. So the relief request tonight specifically is a variance of 7.25 feet. That's just a copy of the table in the application. This is the site plan. With a little, sorry, I guess. A little annotation up here. So for those who came, we were standing basically in this area of the driveway. I put a little X, and we have the existing house, and we have the location of the proposed garage. It's, I believe, a 28 by 28 foot square footprint. And as we noted, for those of you who were able to make the site visit, and hopefully for those who have been able to go through the application package, you will see that we have a design of the garage that is made to mimic the design of the existing house. In fact, this is what I call the front face of the garage doors are. This mirrors a lot of the architectural detail you can see from the driveway currently of the existing house. And the side entrance and exit mirrors the basically the porch overhang that you saw that we face in this garage. So we have this little mirror into the two buildings looking at each other. These are just the remainder of the plan. If there are specific questions, I'm happy to go through. You'll notice that I've highlighted part of this in yellow, part of this in green. The yellow portion is the portion of the roof that is technically above 25 feet above pre-construction grade. So if we were to follow the law strictly, basically the entire top 7 feet has to get lopped off and make for quite an ugly garage. And again, if we go to the behind this, it's if anyone who stood at the street line of the driveway line, it's hard to see in this plan, but I can tell you from reading it that the elevation of the driveway where we stood is around 106, 107. And the average grade for the garage location is 99.75. So we are about 7.5 feet down on average grade from the driveway apron itself. Obviously, to have a garage 7 feet down from the driveway is inviting a lot of drainage nightmares, a lot of difficulty navigating in and out safely, and eliminates any use of the apron in front of the driveway for reasonable turnaround access. So the plan is to fill that portion of the yard to bring it up level with or slightly above the grade of the existing driveway, and then build the garage basically level with the driveway itself, that you'll just drive slightly up or straight onto the garage pad and into the pad itself. Question that was asked at the site visit, I want to confirm tonight, is that there'll be no lower level to this garage. There's no basement, there's no storage below. It will be filled and then a slab poured. This is not a way to sneak in a secret basement or anything like that. It really is just going to be a garage. This is the historical plan we found recorded at the Registry of Deeds. This kind of shows you the scope and the size of the lot itself. That little red square is the garage, and the larger rectangle, what I call above on this non-north aligned plan, is the actual house itself. The remainder of the lot, as you can see, is quite vast. So anyone who came out to a site visit either on Saturday or on their own saw nothing but trees and one peekaboo view of a nearby neighbor who has given the owner their support. Here again, just to really drive home how remote this is. There's the house sitting among the woods, and here's the house as shown on the basic GIS map. This is a picture of the house itself. As you can see, the architectural detail in this house is beautiful, and obviously the garage wants to be in line and in keeping with that architectural detail. And then this is the topography itself, as I'll talk about in a moment before I turn this back over, is that in order to grant a variance, we have to show there is in fact a hardship that is unique to the property, and that hardship has to be based on one of several things, which could be topographical challenges. And this shows the slope of the lot slipping away from the driveway. This is the bylaw written out. Again, for the first part, I believe we have a pretty clear finding that you'll be able to make that there is a topographical challenge that is unique to this property, and that if the owner was forced to comply with the regulation strictly, it would be a hardship. Again, we're either at this point driving down to a garage or lopping off the roof of a garage and making a garage that does not look in keeping with the house itself. The last part of the test is, with all that being established, are you able to grant the relief without nullifying or substantially derogating the intent of the bylaw? Again, this is going to be affecting almost nobody except in a positive direction to the owner of the property themselves. The one nearest neighbor who has a chance of seeing it through the trees is on board, and otherwise anybody who lives in the area or in the town in general will really have no idea this happened unless they happen to drive up the long windy driveway and see a garage that hopefully has been designed to make it look like the garage has always been there anyway. So again, one last time to drive home, the specific relief requested is a variance from section 5.6 of 7.25 feet. I thank you very much. I'll take down my screen share, but I can always put it back up if anybody needs anything further. Thank you.
Questions from the board?
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, thank you for a thorough presentation. There's a existing on the exhibit plan, the site plan showing the new footprint. There's an existing stone retaining wall, and the new structure essentially clips or intersects that. I presume because you're going to be bringing the grade up to match the driveway apron, as you called it, that there'll be some substantial fill in that area. You mentioned that. What I don't see on the I don't see a concrete or a designed or engineered wall to support that area. And it's my presumption that that would have to be an engineered wall. Presumably poured out of concrete and presumably poured at the same time the foundation was poured. Is that the case, or is this just lacking in detail at the planning stage at this point?
Yeah, so I don't want to answer any questions I'm not fully aware of, but my understanding is that the fill being brought in is going to have to be looked at by probably an engineer to make sure that's structurally sound to hold the garage itself. Obviously, my client has not engaged that level of detail. We want to see if we can get permission in the first place to build the thing before it goes beyond what you saw with the hand-drawn architectural plans. So I take your point, and I would hope that the board would recognize, obviously, the building permit process, they're not going to pull anything without proving the building inspector that this is going to be structurally safe.
Well, thank you, but as far as you know, the stone retaining wall would be removed for that section that's affected by the new construction.
Either removed or built on, depending on structural soundness. I can represent that they're not going to be, footprint beyond the garage wall, from a pyramid or anything like that.
Understood.
Brian, do you have any questions?
None.
Sean?
None.
Kathy?
Why, and I'm not like an engineering person, so this might be a really obvious question, but why can't you regrade the driveway instead of making the garage taller?
Oh, sure. So the driveway being 7 feet up, the driveway matches the existing staircase landings for the existing house itself. We'd have to dig the driveway down 7 feet, and now you'd have a 7 feet drop off when you walked out the front door of the house, basically to get down to the driveway.
Okay, okay.
First step is a killer.
It would be, right? Yeah.
Well,
You can't,
the other argument that could be made is that you could redesign the roof. You mentioned lopping off the top 6 or 7 feet to make it comply with the height. That would be ill-advised from an architectural standpoint, because you're
Right.
matching I think it's a 12 pitch of the existing structure. So you want to keep it in harmony with the existing building, make it look like it was part of it. So you could just make that a flat roof if you were really being,
We go build a really ugly cube.
yeah.
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 Can you explain why the structure itself needs to be 26 feet high rather than 25?
Sure.
Just the structure itself.
Yeah, so obviously the initial, the level of the first level of the garage where the straight up and down walls are before the roof begins pitching need to be sufficient height that the doors can be installed, that vehicles, including, modern SUVs will be able to clear getting into this. And then from there, in order to make sure that the peak of the roof matches the angles found throughout the existing home, the end result is that the very ridge of the roof is 26 feet as you stand at the door. To make it 25 feet, then squats the angle down, and all of a sudden you have a mismatched garage that does no longer match the architectural detail of the house itself. And again, one of the big goals here is to make it look like this garage was here when the house showed up, and not some sort of modern addition to an otherwise beautiful historic home.
Any more questions from the board? Is there any member of the public that would like to be heard on this application? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom. Seeing none, we'll proceed. Are we ready? Let me make a motion.
Yes.
I move to close the public hearing and approve the application of Joel Pavaza, Seaside Legal Solutions PC, on behalf of Samuel and Drayton Martin for a variance under sections 5.6 and 7.4.6 of the zoning bylaw, and or other relief as may be necessary to construct a detached garage at 107 Summer Street, assessors map number 14, lot number 34 in District A, filed with the town clerk on December 15, 2022, based on a finding that the garage 26-foot building height is appropriate to be consistent with the architecture of the existing residential dwelling, and the ridge height of 32.25 feet from mean construction grade is due to the steep drop off on the property at the location of the garage, owing to circumstances relating to the shape and topography of the land, especially affecting such land, but not affecting generally the zoning district in which it is located, a literal enforcement of the provisions of the bylaw would involve substantial hardship, and that the desired relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the bylaw, based on the condition that the garage is constructed in accordance with the following documents. Site plan prepared by Hancock Survey Associates, Inc., for works by Jesse De Benedictis, LLC, dated November 21st, 2022. Designs prepared by LF Studio for works by Jesse De Benedictis, LLC, dated September 28th, 2022. Main level layout, upper level layout, roof layout, front elevation, left side elevation, rear elevation, 28 feet, 0 inches, building cross section, AA, right side elevation.
Seconded.
James seconds it. Any discussion? Ready for a vote? Catherine? Approved. James,
Approved.
Brian,
Approved.
John,
Approved.
and Sarah approves.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody want to write this?
All right.
James, you write it.
I'll approve it.
Yeah.
Review.
Very much. So we'll be writing the decision within 90 days.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now will address the appeal of an administrative decision that's been continued. I will open the continued public hearing for the application of Benjamin B. Timon, attorney, on behalf of Samuel and Tracy Byrne of 1 to 3 Blossom Lane, for the appeal of an administrative decision under section 7.4.5 of the zoning bylaw regarding a request for zoning enforcement filed with the building inspector on June 21st, 2022 for construction in progress, which appears to exceed the scope of the special permit granted and building permit issued at 2 Blossom Lane, assessors map number 17, lot number 12 in District E, filed with the town clerk on August 8th, 2022. There are 5 members here tonight who will be voting on the application: Ms. Howe, Mr. Solacey, Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Mellish, and Mr. Zahn. Although Mr. Zahn did not attend the October meeting, he has watched the video of the meeting, has read the minutes of that meeting, and he feels prepared to vote on this application. Is that correct, Sean?
That is correct.
Thank you. I will start by reviewing the information with respect to the garage, main entrance, spa, pool shed, coverage by structures, and total coverage by structures and impervious surface. We'll then take comments from the public with respect to only those matters, and we will discuss the issues with respect to the topography after we've concluded that portion. I ask everyone to be brief, not duplicate what others have said, and I will limit the amount of time each person will be allowed to speak. There has been a lot that has transpired since this application was originally submitted. We received a letter from Attorney Barry on November 10th, 2022, indicating that the property owners at 2 Blossom Lane had agreed to reduce coverage by structures to 29.52%, which is below the 29.8% coverage reflected in the plans incorporated in the special permit decision. They agreed to remove the spa and reduce the size of the pool shed to 197 square feet and reduce the size of the terrace, which results in coverage by structures and impervious surface of 32.6%, which is less than the 35% condition included in the special permit. Is there somebody here who would like to speak to the changes that have been or will be made, and to also explain exactly what's going on with the field house.
Certainly. This is Michael Gray for Mountain Meal. Assume you have access to the document.
Yeah.
So the changes that were made since, as you just kind of outlined succinctly, was the pool house structure like reduced to under 200 square feet. The which I can speak to if you're interested in learning more about that. Therefore, does not require a building permit. And this has been, we've been working with Paul Orlando all along as far as checks and balances to make sure it's in compliance, which it is. So we've gotten that. That falls under the lot coverage by structures, and the total lot coverage of 35% with the special permit. We now are in compliance. In addition, we reduced the terrace as you noted, and have made other movements to bring it further into compliance. We removed the spa. The spa was an error which when it was pointed out to us, we immediately rectified and removed that. So rather than rebuilding it, we decided to remove it completely, so it's no longer part of the scope of work.
And have there been plans submitted with respect to the field shed?
The full shed plans have been submitted, and it has been tentatively approved. Steve, is that right?
They've been submitted, sorry,
Go ahead, Mr. Harrington.
Steve Harrington, Carpenter McNeil. They have been submitted to the board to review prior to being submitted to the building department.
You know when those were submitted to the board?
Prior to the previous meeting.
You have a copy of those?
I have one copy. I could potentially put it up on the screen too, if that was. Sorry,
Are you on Zoom?
I'm ready to zoom in right now.
Save the day.
Oh, I just lost you. I told you when I lost you. Are you in?
But I got disabled participant.
Yeah, I know. I gotta find you and I have to click on you in order to do it.
Stephen.
I have to find it.
Stephen Harrington.
Okay, you should be good.
Okay. You guys see that?
Yes.
So what we attempted to do here was show you the outline of what was originally planned, and then what it's, the final is obviously darkened in. So this gives you the dimensions of the overall structure, which is 197 square feet.
So the half bath was removed.
Yes. Yep, it's just a simple rectangle.
And how high above the roof is the chimney?
It is, looks like 2.5 feet.
Do people have on the board have questions with respect to the changes to the pool shed?
Looks like it's been significantly reduced in scope and size.
What's larger than what was originally submitted in the application, special permit application.
Right, we had originally
180
approved 180
80.
square feet.
And this is 197.
97.
10% roughly.
You're troubled?
Sure. And this speaks to a bigger situation where people show us one thing and then bring us something back to us. They showed us 180 square feet. I'd like to see 180 square feet. That's what was presented to the neighbors. This is what the neighbors approved and accepted. Okay, and then just incrementally changing things along. But that's just me. We've seen it on too many occasions where applicants don't necessarily adhere to what they submitted.
Right, normally a modification would be requested, like we had at 8 Kingsway. We made 2 subsequent changes, and each time they came back to us and asked us to modify.
The process. I mean, the planning board has spent a lot of time tightening up zoning bylaws. Doesn't matter if people are going to ignore them anyway. And that's what I'm seeing lately.
Catherine?
I don't know, I don't know what to say right now, I don't
I
disagree.
would argue this is a minor change. I mean, it's still under 200 square feet, and technically, we could go to Reed's Ferry and get a shed and put it there without permit, without anything.
The challenge is that the pool shed was included in the application for a special permit. And the special permit was approved based on the fact that it was going to be 180 square feet.
Okay, so 17 square feet is a,
I don't know. It doesn't,
I would ask, I mean, this whole project, we've worked hand in hand with the building inspector. And I would ask, typically, we run these things before the building inspector, before we do anything. And we've supported the building inspector all along. And the guidance that we've received has been from the building inspector, which we are in support of. And so I think a 17 square foot difference, sometimes when you're building things, site conditions, something might change where things are changed a few feet here or there, and I think that's a kind of standard practice for construction. And if it obviously, if it's well in excess of that, then yes, we need to definitely file a change. But in this instance, I think the 17 square feet, I mean, we can talk about it. And we're not trying to subvert anything, or that extra 17 square feet isn't going to kind of make or break things here. If it's a matter of shaving off 17 square feet, we can do that. But this works with
Madam Chair,
Yes, fine.
the issue here is that we wouldn't be here had you followed, maybe we're looking at something that was twice as large. Okay, and now it seems like, okay, and then we're gonna keep coming back and with a compromise. All right, when in fact, you didn't work closely with the building inspector to provide the original pool house, not a shed, but a structure. Much nicer than a lot of houses I've seen. Okay. Without consulting with the inspector. It was the neighbors that brought us back here.
Yeah,
Right,
but
I think what you're saying, well, if I'm understanding you correctly, it is that, you know, the problem isn't really that the pool set is being increased from 180 to 197. It's that it was increased from 180 to 435 with no permission, no nothing, no whatever. And now all of a sudden, you know, we're saying, oh, well, you know, it's not really that big of an increase, 180 to 197. That's not really what we're talking about here. Because
Yes, that's the intent.
I think we can also look at it another way, is if the original, forget about the 435, that's clearly an issue. If the original sign,
Go ahead.
please go on mute. If the original design had been 197 square feet instead of 180, would it have made any difference in our decision?
Exactly, probably not, but again, at least the neighbors would have had some say in it.
Well, I have a question. If you went back to Paul Orlando with a redesign, knowing that you were permitted to build 180 square feet, why did the new design end up at 197 and not 180?
It was a function of the dimensions of the depth of the building. I mean, basically, we needed something that had the depth, that extra 17 square feet worked with just giving it that, because right now I believe it's 9.5 feet.
So it was a design consideration.
Yes. Yeah, and absolutely, the original structure and how that came to be was an oversight on our part. We weren't trying to slip anything by anybody. That's why we've been working with Paul all along, and he's the one who kind of brought it to our attention at first. And obviously, when you're designing something, you tend to work on it and try to improve it. And as we did that, it kicked over that 200 square foot. You don't need a permit for something over 200 square feet, which it was a complete honest mistake. And then it was like, okay, we got this. And it's noticed, we've been very proactive in trying to rectify any mistakes. We're not perfect, we make mistakes. The spa got put in the setback. That was a thing that we took ownership of and got rid of it right away. We realized that was a mistake. And we've been very open and honest with Paul and trying to work through any of these things, and any feedback we get, we rectify right away. We've been in business here for over 30 years in Manchester, and honestly, we wouldn't be in business as long if we operated the way that certain people imply that we operate, asking forgiveness instead of permission. We don't do that. That's not how we operate. We've been in business a long time. We have a pretty solid reputation. So when there's a mistake like this, we own it and we take care of it. And the relative difference between 197 and 180, if that's something that you're going to draw a hard line on, then fine, we'll make it 180. But the 197 just worked better, again, architecturally.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
With respect to the 180 versus 197, when you sat down with Paul and presented the new design, was he aware that the new design was 197 and not the approved 180?
Yes. I
And
believe
he
it
gave
was.
you a thumbs up on that,
Yes. Yes.
based on your assertion that it was a design issue, and
Yes, he was concerned more with it being under 200 square feet. And that was.
so it met that requirement, and
Yes.
your design needs, was the design need also as a basis of what was already poured in place for concrete? I mean, were you,
No, because we did have to remove some of the stuff that was there, so.
so that wasn't the reason?
Right.
I find that answer satisfactory.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, Sean.
On the, when you're saying the design, 17 square feet, what part of the design is actually changing that to give it that you need that 17?
You said it was the
The
depth.
depth. The depth, not the length, but the depth.
So why the depth?
So that there's a little bit more room in there. It actually ends up being like an extra 6 or 8 inches in length of depth. Because when the doors are there and they open, you need enough room in there to have a piece of furniture or a piece of equipment. Because otherwise the doors won't open.
I think one of the challenges with this entire application is that as a design build firm, we tend to make changes as you go along. The expectation is that when a special permit is issued, if there are changes made, that the changes are brought back to us. Even with respect to the difference in the design between the building permit and the special permit, there were changes. Those should have been brought back to us. It would have made things a lot smoother, because in all likelihood, we would have approved a modification. And I think the same thing with the pool house. I think that when you're making changes, when you're dealing with a special permit, you need to be looking at the terms of the special permit, not just dealing with the building. So that, and granted, I think the building inspector should have notified us when the building plans were different than what we had approved too. So that's on us, on the town to some extent. Okay,
Madam Chair, I'm not sure what,
hold on just a moment. Yeah, I'm gonna take, could you just put your screen down so I can see people? See people. Mr. Timon, would you like to speak? And then I'll take briefly, and then I'll take,
swap with Mr. Gray, if that's okay.
I'll take questions from the public on this aspect. Please be brief.
So, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board, Ben Timon for the petitioners, Samuel and Tracy Byrne. So we're talking about the pool house. You know, actions speak louder than words, and you brought up the fact that what was built was 430 plus square feet, and it's just hard to believe that that can be characterized as an honest mistake. I agree with the sentiments of the board members that that needs to be taken into context here and taken into consideration. And as you said, Madam Chair, the applicant should have come and sought revisions, and they still should, because the request for zoning enforcement that we made to Director Orlando included a request that, you know, that those types of zoning bylaws and requirements be followed. And so I would urge the board, as part of its decision, to require that for this and for any variations from the special permit approved plans, of which there are many, and I think the board intends to pick through some of the other elements of this project, that you should require them to seek an amendment to the special permit for these changes. I don't know if Inspector Orlando is here tonight virtually or not. If he is, I imagine that he'll speak to this, but you know, the idea that, with all due respect to Mr. Gray, the idea that this has been, you know, a smooth and cooperative and normal type of process between the developer and the building inspector just isn't factual. I mean,
Well, I don't think that's for you to say. You haven't been party to those conversations.
well, I've been a pretty keen observer of the things that have been happening.
I would ask that Mr. Orlando speak to that.
Yes.
Well, so if he's here, I'm sure he'll.
He is. I will call on him at this point. Thank you.
The other thing I'd just like to point out, Madam Chair, is that it's this board's responsibility to also apply the law. And the board has my letter to Inspector Orlando, copied to the board from December 8th of 2022, which points out that this pool house or any structure, any new structure on this non-conforming lot needs a variance. The pool house needs a variance. The case law makes clear, as I've cited in this letter, it doesn't matter if it's a hair below 200 square feet, which this 197 square foot structure obviously was designed to be just under that threshold. But it doesn't matter. It needs a variance, and so does the pool, by the way, because the pool, which I imagine the board will get to, was also built considerably larger than what was approved. That's a non-conforming structure. That needs a variance. And so I would urge the board on all of these issues to stick to what this owner was allowed to build and focus very clearly on the many, many areas where it has built beyond that.
Thank you, Mr. Diamond. Mr. Orlando, would you like to speak to the structures that have been built and the proposed pool house and the extent to which they conform with the building code bylaws?
Yes, I think that when these structures were permitted, I wasn't looking at the pool house from a building permit standpoint because it was under 200 square feet. It would not require a building permit. When it came to my attention that it was over 200 square feet, I did notify the contractor, who gave me plans right away, showing me how large the pool house was. I directed them that they would, to have a pool house that large, would need to get approval from the zoning board. They have changed the design of the pool house substantially to make it smaller and more compliant with the bylaw and the the zoning decision. They have, made those adjustments promptly. And I think it would not require a building permit because of its size. And I think it probably could be found that it's substantially in compliance with the decision.
Thank you. Does the board have questions on any of the other structures? You're good with the other structures? And I mean, I think one of the questions raised was the fact that there was a deck on the house. The deck is clearly on the building permit that was approved. And again, the building permit was not appealed. Special permit was not appealed. And it appears to me as if the buildings constructed are consistent with the design submitted with the building permit. And I think the property owner has a right to rely on the building permit.
Madam Chair, you can go through the other elements in the manner that you said the board would in October, where you would go point by point and seek public and allow public comment on different project elements.
I'm gonna take public comment now. On the structures, so if anybody is,
Structures generally.
just the structure, nothing to do with topography at this point in time. Okay? Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak with respect to the as-built structures? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom. I will limit you to 3 minutes. Sam Byrne?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my only point you just made about no one appealing the building permit, none of the neighbors were provided the plans that were actually built. What was provided was what was provided when the special permit hearing was undertaken. So we had none of those details, even though apparently they existed, were provided at the time, and we wouldn't be getting a copy of a building permit if one was filed for. There was no public notice of a building permit being filed. There was no notification to neighbors. So even though these intentions to build the pool, a pool house, not a shed, it's not an equipment shed. Equipment sheds don't have fireplaces and bathrooms. They went ahead and built it, and now everyone's backpedaling, but we didn't have the ability to comment. So to the extent that you said no one appealed the building permit, how would we appeal it if there was no notice until after the structures were built? And in fact, no building permit was actually ever applied for before the pool house that was built and had to be removed was actually built. So I don't think it's fair to ask us to try to comment or appeal something that we were never provided. If all these original plans had been provided as part of the initial special permit process, I can certainly say that in my case and Tracy's case, there would have been significant objections. Even though they appeared to have existed, they weren't what was provided. A very simplistic plan was provided. There were no decks, there was no pool house, there was nothing along that nature. So I don't think it's fair to say that we should have been the ones that needed to be bringing it into compliance with what was approved in the special permit.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. All I'm stating is that under the regulations, you have a limited time within which to appeal a building permit, whether you know about it or not. That's what the regulations state. And your appeal covers not only the special permit, but also the building permit. So you have incorporated the building permit into your appeal. And we feel that a property owner has a right to rely on a building permit when they're building property.
I understand, but it just doesn't seem like it's an appropriate standard if it's not remotely in compliance with what the special permit that was issued was. I can't be down there enforcing those items.
Well, the pool house is now down to 197 square feet.
The pool equipment shed
Yes.
with a fireplace and 20 some odd feet above the property line that was raised 6 feet, and the pool that's larger than what was planned, or the spa that was put in a different place. I agree with the sentiments of the board that this has been a death by 1,000 cuts incrementally, and it's hard to fathom that it was all done. These are all mistakes in good faith, and I'll end my commentary there.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak? Please raise your hand in Zoom. I saw a hand up before, but I've lost it.
Madam Chair, that was me, Julie Bowery, the attorney for the Smiths. And
Thank you, Ms. Lehman. Go ahead.
my comment, and I wanted to say that I think there was a misunderstanding, but perhaps not, the issue that was certainly raised in my letter, and I appreciate the board's time tonight and every other night in your consideration of my comments. The issue that was raised in my letter concerned the time period of 20 days for bringing an appeal of a special permit decision. And there is certainly no allegation anywhere, and neither Mr. Timon would not suggest as much, that none of the neighbors or certain of the neighbors didn't receive notice or weren't apprised or kept informed. Indeed, the Smiths went out of their way to keep their neighbors informed of these things. And the opportunity for appealing the special permit that was granted by this board after consideration of all the issues was 3 years ago. So to the extent, and the board is correct that a building permit does not require notice to anyone. However, building permits by nature are noticed, particularly to their neighbors, because they're posted. And there was certainly ample opportunity for an appeal of the building permit within 30 days. Certainly less time than that would be needed for these neighbors to see that a building permit had been issued and site work had begun. So I just wanted to point out that distinction, because it's I heard that you had said building permit but corrected yourself to say special permit, but in either case the board is correct. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to speak?
Only if you'll allow me, Madam Chair, it's in a quick rebuttal.
Yes, Mr.
Thank
Timon,
you,
very
Madam
brief,
Chair.
please.
You had it right in October when I remember you said that the standard is comparison between special permit plans and the as-built plans. We still don't have as-built plans, but the notion that the building permit plans move the needle legally is just incorrect. And so I would urge the board to consult with town council on this if it feels that's desirable. But we provided with our appeal a 16-page document that showed the major discrepancies between the special permit plans and as the things were built at that time, and obviously within 5 years. And so that's the relevant standard. And our request for zoning enforcement under sections 70 and 15 of chapter 48 speak to that standard. So the notion that the building permit controls here is simply erroneous.
The only difference between the building permit that was issued and the special permit was with respect to the design. The building permit was the same with respect to height and setbacks and the configuration of the garage and the residential structure.
As we pointed out, the special permit plans did not show the decks. If you look on the last page of those plans, it shows the garage grossly different from what was built.
No, the deck, the design of the building was not discussed by the board. What?
It wasn't material to our decision.
Thank you, Catherine. We were concerned about the location of the structures with respect to the setbacks and the height. We negotiated on the garage and asked them to move it back from the property line so it was consistent with the original garage, which they did. The other setbacks on the residence and the garage, all of those are consistent between the special permit and the building permit. The design was not material to our decision. And the swimming pool was 18 by 40 on the special permit, and it's 20 by 40. And I don't see that as a material difference.
Hundred and 48 square feet on the special permit plans and 792 square feet on the building. As far as the as-built, I disagree.
I don't think that would have made any difference in our decision. If you think about it, I mean, would you have cared? The
No, but I would
decision?
like the opportunity to share.
But we have to look at what we decided. We can't redecide what we decided. And you
Yeah.
can't change what we looked at.
No, my.
And
I know.
we didn't care that much about the size of the pool as long as it met the setbacks.
Mhm.
And
I'm
it
not
wasn't
arguing that point.
outrageous.
Okay. It seems like an awful lot of material from that regard. So that's what, 15-20% margin at this point. I'm not arguing, I don't have a problem with the pool. Okay, and frankly, I don't have a problem with the pool house as it stands now.
Okay,
Okay, how we got here is my problem.
right, and I agree, but
And why we're here is my problem.
I also feel that we raised issues and the property owner did react to them. I mean, what more can you ask?
My only thought
Yeah,
would be that at that time, when you made that decision of what size the pool and all that would have been, was you would have had public opinion in there.
we had absolutely no public opinion when we reviewed this. All the abutters had signed off on things, and I don't think it.
But they signed off on this.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have made any difference, John.
You never, that's an assumption.
The thing that was of importance to us, we were concerned when we were doing our decision because the coverage by structures exceeded what was allowed. The existing did. So we were concerned that they keep the coverage by structures based on what was in the special permit. And then when they came before us, the total coverage by structures and impervious exceeded 35%. We received information on what the area was, which I believe was about 37%. And we asked them to keep it at 35%. But we gave the contractor leeway to figure out which surfaces would be changed to meet the 35%, whether it would be the driveway or the pool patio. That's what we were concerned with. And we didn't have enough information to really know, and we didn't really care how they got down to the 35% as long as they did.
And they did.
And they did. We were concerned about the coverage by structures, which the original as-built exceeded that, and then they come down to slightly under what we'd approved in the special permit by reconfiguring. Thanks. You agree with that, Kathy?
The whole thing. Do you
How
have?
much time do we have?
I think. I'm not sure. I think, I agree with what Brian said, and I agree with what Sarah said, actually, that there's a lot of problems here, with the way this project proceeded, and it is a little bit hard to believe that it was all an innocent mistake or a series of innocent mistakes, because it seems to be a lot of things by a firm that I know is very, very, very capable, generally speaking. So, you know, it's really very troubling. At the same time, you know, what Sarah said, is true. We did, you know, the things that we were concerned with, those requirements have largely been met now at this point, in time. So I agree that that's true. I am troubled though. I'm not sure there's anything we can do about it, but it does bother me that the special permit that we granted wasn't followed, and doesn't even reflect exactly what's there now, because public didn't get a chance to comment on that. We didn't get a chance to comment on that, and they didn't get a chance to appeal what is there now. To the property owner's point, there's an appeal period, but if inaccurate plans were filed, that appeal period is meaningless, because
Yeah, but
so, I mean, that's troubling.
anybody can build any design they want on their property if it's conforming. So design, no, but design,
I'm not talking about the design,
well, okay, what are you talking about then?
just the 20 day to appeal the special permit that we granted and the size of things,
Well, the
right?
size of the house and the garage are identical. They have removed the spa.
I
which was
understand
100
that
square
now,
feet.
I understand that now.
Right.
It's nearly identical or
Okay,
very close to identical. But it isn't exactly identical. And that's not really fair. So I'm not saying that it's the end of the world, but I think it's important to point out.
I would also point out, as I recall, and I haven't looked at the drawings recently, the stone wall that surrounds the site. In the original special permits, there was no stone wall along the back. There was no lighting along the back. There's, I mean, I believe it shows as a wooden fence. I have to go back and check. There are a lot of minor changes that add up. Okay, and I find it disturbing that it seems like it was there was an intent, not to misrepresent, but I mean, again, have
think
neighbors
there's
on the
an
back
intent.
wall, in the backyard, know that there was gonna be a fence, I mean, a brick wall with lighting across the top of it. They may have had something to say to that point.
So
But it
you
was
think
never.
there's an intent by our company?
No, I'm saying is, I don't know what the intent was. All I know is that there wasn't an opportunity for the neighbors to speak to that,
To the back wall?
to the back wall.
Yes, we brought that up to Paul Orlando before we built it,
Okay,
because we wanted to make sure that if we need a building permit for it, because we weren't sure. So he was well aware from conception through completion and approval.
okay,
And to us as a builder, that is our normal course of business. We always defer to the building inspector, which we did, and he was on board with it. And we built it with his full knowledge and understanding.
But again, the public has no insight into that.
but the walls,
Of course they should. There was a public hearing on a plan that wasn't built. And so again, the board, the board, the fence.
let's not have a back and forth, please.
The board respectfully should order this property owner to submit an application to revise the special permit. So that the public can have input on these things. These are not minor matters and, respectfully, the neighbors do care. They've shown that they are pretty upset about these changes. And, accountability and fidelity to the bylaws really demands that the board say, okay, you don't have these changes, submit for an amendment like you should have done.
I want to go back to what the bylaws cover. The bylaws do not cover walls. That was not a portion of our decision. It's not something we determined. It doesn't require a building permit. So, I don't think the walls should be an issue. They put in a septic system that required a certain amount of walls
And Phil.
and fill. So
I hear what you're saying, okay, but in the overall scheme of things, okay. Had the public originally seen this wall with lighting along the back, they would have commented on it. And then perhaps during the back and forth of the original hearings, something could have been done.
Madam Chair, may I please speak for a moment? I have a couple of things
Sure.
that I do want to address here. And I would like to point out in the first instance that while this has been time consuming of the board's time, and we're all mindful of that, it's not correct to say that these were done or to suggest that these things were intentional. I would remind the board, as well as Mr. Timon, that the Supreme Judicial Court in the Bjorklund decision, among many, has said that these types of changes that occur during the building process do not necessarily imply an intensification or a modification of what was approved. And the fact that these were undertaken with the consultation with the building inspector at every turn is critical. The fact that the wall is not part of the special permit means that it doesn't matter if the public saw the wall on the drawings and didn't like it. That was not the purview of this board. I would like to point out as well that the system works. The special permit was granted. It was recorded without any appeal, and that means it's final under the laws of the Commonwealth. These changes that have been made, which when Mr. Byrne complained to the building inspector, and the building inspector, as the zoning enforcement officer for the town, followed the code, even issued cease and desist orders, and required that the applicant perform certain modifications to bring it more in conformance with what was depicted on the special permit and building permit plans. That was done here. So the fact is that the system works. The plans have been brought into compliance, largely into compliance, and Mr. Timon knows that any of the issues that have been discussed here and the minor modifications that have resulted at the end of this process, bringing it in compliance, are not anywhere near necessary. And as this board has already indicated, they could have granted it if the applicant had done so and requested modifications, it could have granted those modifications. So we would respectfully ask that the board consider that on top of all of these things that have come and gone, that at the end of the day, this project and the plans have been revised and significant changes have been made at great expense to the property owner to bring them into compliance. So the message is heard loud and clear. However, what was wrong has been rectified with the approval of the building inspector pursuant to his letter of July of last year, which is what this appeal is about. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
thank you. Any other thoughts on the structures? Okay. We move to topography.
Oh, yeah. See that.
Now, when this appeal was made, they were asked for an enforcement order, and they appealed because they didn't feel the enforcement order had gone far enough. Mr. Orlando issued a subsequent enforcement order on December 13th, 2022, with respect to the topographical changes. And I thought I would ask Mr. Orlando to explain that order and how the property owners responded to that order. Mr. Orlando?
Yes, I'm here. When the contractor provided me with an as-built elevation plan. I did notice that some areas to the, on the right side of the property were not in compliance with the bylaw. They would have required a special permit for the amount of fill that was brought into that side of the property. I issued a cease and desist order with a requirement that they bring that into compliance. And they subsequently provided me with a remediation plan, which would be acceptable, and bring them into compliance with the bylaw. I don't think the work has been completed yet because of the weather, but it's their intention to do that. And I think that that would bring them into compliance with the topographical change requirements of the bylaw.
Okay. Anybody have questions of Mr. Orlando?
Nope.
I'm good.
Mr. Timon, do you wish to speak briefly on this matter?
I do, really, I have a question from Mr. Orlando, and then I'd like to ask, Mr. Merrick, our professional and civil engineer to speak to this, because he submitted a report on this issue. My question to Mr. Orlando is whether, Mr. Orlando, whether your assessment of compliance depends upon the property owner's green activities interpretation. In other words, that they should be allowed to benefit from 3 feet's worth of increase in elevation under that interpretation.
Mr. Orlando?
I'm sorry, what was the question? I lost you for a second there.
Well, the applicant has said that essentially they are entitled to 3 feet of added elevation under their interpretation of the green activities exclusion. That they essentially should be able to get 12 inches or for over 3 years, starting that clock from the time that the special permit was granted. And we've laid out in detail why we think that interpretation is completely wrong. And if the interpretation is wrong, there's no way that they fall under the special permit thresholds. And I wanted to get your review, if you have one, on the Smith team's interpretation of the green activities exemption.
Okay, I think because of the, because it hasn't been 3 calendar years, I took a more conservative approach and determined that they'd be entitled to 2 feet of elevation change. And I did see the letter that you submitted from your engineer. However, it did fail to include the last sentence in the definition of green activities, which does allow the annual addition of up to 12 inches of soil or any other material in the area. So, so I think they're entitled to that 24 inches total with a conservative approach. And that's what my decision was based on.
If the board is amenable to it, I'd like Dan Merrick to speak on behalf of the Burns on this issue.
Okay, and we did receive the letter, so hopefully he can be brief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Hard to hear you.
You can't hear me, is that correct?
Speak up.
Yes,
Speak a little louder.
A little louder.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Okay, great. May I share my screen?
you should be able to do so.
Great, thank you very much. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Again, my name is Dan Merrickin, the owner of Legacy Engineering. I'm a registered professional engineer, and I was asked by the Burns to explore this question about the topographical changes in land clearing special permit triggers and thresholds. And there are, as I mentioned in my letter, two triggers that I think are very easily demonstrated. One is that the fact that any disturbance of more than 10% of the setback area requires a special permit. Now, this red line is the setback line. And the owner of the property has disturbed, by my estimation, 98% of the setback area on the property. There's a tiny little bit on the right side of the property that perhaps was not disturbed. So the property owner contends that all of that work is an excluded activity, which, you know, to me, what is the point of a 10% disturbance threshold if you can disturb everything you want? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I took a deeper look into this. And I focused in on patios and the walls. The walls are not structures under the bylaw. They're not entitled to that exception. They're not a green activity. The patios themselves are also not a green activity. They're not structures. They're not an exception. So when you look at the question of whether or not more than 10% of the setback area was disturbed for activities that are not exceptions, it's obvious to me that it was. We took an estimate. We basically calculated the amount of area covered by patio in the setback area, and it's 18.4% of the setback area. So by itself, more than the 10%. We then took a look at what it would take to build the walls that they built, 400 linear feet of wall around 3 sides of this lot. A lot of it with a 4-foot deep footing. And that obviously involves a substantial excavation and disturbance. So we assigned a modest 10-foot wide disturbance area for the wall construction. And that totals up to another 27% of the setback area disturbed for the non-exempt wall construction. And that totals 45%. Now, I do not agree, as Mr. Timon indicated, I don't agree with the property owner's assertions about, you know, the green activities, allowing them to indiscriminately fill and disturb as much of the setback area as they want, as long as they don't raise the grade by a certain amount. I think that's completely inconsistent with this 10% threshold. The second thing we looked at was the earthwork volume. The trigger for a special permit is 20 cubic yards. That is a very small amount of dirt. A competent excavator could excavate that in about 20 or 30 minutes. And they've been digging on this property for years. So we look at the same thing. The retaining walls, in our opinion, are not an excluded activity. The patios are not an excluded activity. And we calculated what the amount of earthwork, and it's not just bringing in fill. It's excavation, deposit, or removal of, or redeposit of any type of earthwork material, basically. So when you're thinking about that trigger, it's not just the amount of fill that might have been needed to raise the patio areas to finished grade. It's for the retaining wall, where you have these very deep footing foundations. How much material do they have to excavate to install those footings 4 or 5 feet in the ground, and then backfill it? So again, we have 400 linear feet of wall. We took a fairly conservative analysis, and in my opinion, the wall activity resulted in the excavation of at least 150 cubic yards of material, and likely as much as 300 cubic yards. The patio areas, the amount of fill that was brought in to raise the patio to grade, or maybe not brought in, but at least moved around on the property, which is a threshold trigger under the bylaw, 105 cubic yards. So between those two alone, setting aside any disagreement about whether the property owner's green activities exemption is valid or not, just between the work associated with these, very substantial retaining walls and the patios, you're far, far in excess of 20 feet yards. And, I think it's interesting, the conversation the board was having about the walls and how you felt that it didn't fall within your consideration. But with a special permit being required and being triggered by the construction of those walls, it most certainly would fall within the consideration of the planning board for the special permit that, in my opinion, is and was required to be obtained. So it's our view that all work within the setback areas should cease, and that the applicant should be required to seek the special permit for topographical changes and land clearing. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about my analysis or my views on this topic.
Does the property owner have any analysis with respect to what portion of the work in the setback is due to utilities and
I
excluded?
do have a response to that,
Mr. Harrington?
Stephen Harrington. If I can still share, I can put up basically what Paul Orlando had provided in his stop order and our response and the reasoning behind Paul's decision and our support of that.
Okay. You should still be able to share.
First, I'd like to point out that in the recent review of the topographical changes that Paul Orlando just did, he determined that 2 feet of fill would be allowed over the entire site under the green activities exemption. And the building inspector correctly identified an area of concern in his, which was the orange area in that site plan, which was the area that was above that 2-foot line and not part of any exemption that is allowed by the code. Now, with all the calculations that were just presented to you, first of all, ignore that entire decision. The other thing is, so the reason that none of the other areas are included in that are included in the exemption, the reason that all the other areas are included in the exemption is because the 2 feet of green space exclusion allows any material to be applied onto that or onto that 2 feet. It says, or any other material. So in that respect, anything that's under the 2-foot threshold, whether it's a patio or whether it's a walkway or whether it's grass, is excluded. The patios, whether there's a patio on it or not, is not of importance. And so that requirement allows all the areas that are in the setback but under the 2 feet to be exempt. And the only parts that are not under 2 feet and not exempt are the areas that Paul Orlando correctly identified in that orange area. Speaking to the issue of the excavation of the site perimeter walls, the code here is called topographical changes, and digging for a foundation and then putting the material back where you took it is not a topographical change. There's an exemption for all the structures, for building all the utilities, for building all the structures, for building the septic system, which excludes anything where you're removing, you have to dig, and then you just put the material back where it was. So the assumption that all this area where we excavated and removed material and then put it back in the same place is somehow part of a topographical change, I think is a misinterpretation of the code. And if that were true, every project that comes through here would need a bit to go to the planning board because they'd be excavating, more than the amount that's allowed. So when you look at the area that Paul Orlando has correctly identified as the area concerned, which is above the 2 foot fill line, which he is allowed and is not excluded, that is that area. Now, when we went to revise the grades to comply with Paul Orlando's review, what we did was we lowered this purple portion down to that 2 foot elevation change, so that portion no longer is not in compliance. It's now in compliance and meeting the code based on the 2 foot, except so it is now exempt because it's under that 2 foot area. The remaining areas for both cubic yards and for the disturbance area, these areas are the only areas that are now part of that unexcluded area. And we did the calculation and showed that the teal areas here were areas that we have kept at the existing proposed grade, the original proposed grade. And then these yellow areas are areas where we're sloping that grade down to meet the new reduced grade, so that it is exempt. And those areas, which are the only areas that we're now applying here, the volume calculation for those teal areas and the yellow areas is 19.1 cubic yards. And the percent of the setback area is 4.3%. And that's how we have gotten to, with Paul's help, to determine that we are in compliance with the topographical requirements, that we have not exceeded either the fill amount or the disturbed area amount in the setback areas.
Any questions from the board?
Makes sense to me.
Could you put the screen down? Are there any members of the public who wish to be heard on the topographical changes? If so, please raise your hand.
Madam Chair,
Mr. American?
I'd just like to address a thought here. The property owner's contention that excavation for a structure is exempt. There is an exemption for a structure, but your bylaw in the definition of a structure specifically states that a wall is not a structure. So an excavation for a wall would not therefore be an exempt activity. And the green area exemption only includes the annual addition of soil to any area. It does not allow for any excavation of an area. So they want to argue about patios, fine. The wall is not a structure, and they undertook a massive excavation, and excavation is a trigger for the special permit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Definition of an excavation is it creates a cavity, according to Webster. When you remove earth and put it back, that's not an excavation. An excavation would leave a hole. We obviously, in all our construction, we are removing soil, we're putting something back and putting the soil back. So at the end of the day, the title of this whole section is topographical changes. And what has changed on the topography of the site? When we started and when we finished, and that's what matters.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
And I would say, what this has to do with it being more detrimental to the neighborhood, I have no idea.
Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard? Please raise your hand. Nobody wants to be recognized.
I would just, if I could,
Mr. Gray,
I just wanted to introduce Rob McNeil, who's here. He's the president, principal owner of Carpenter McNeil. I think Rob just wanted the opportunity to just say a couple words about how our company has been portrayed in this situation.
thank you, Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
McNeil.
Thank you.
My name is Rob McNeil. I live on Eagle Head Road here in Manchester. I'm president of Carpenter and McNeil. I wanted to clarify a few things and maybe provide some background to all of this and make two brief points. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you in person, which is terrific. To start with, I've been practicing architecture in Manchester since 1986. My family's lived here since 1991. My late partner and I founded Carpenter McNeil in 1996. I served on the Zoning Board of Appeals from 1995 to 2000. And I served on the Historic Commission for 6 years after that. So parenthetically, a shout out to you folks. I resigned from the zoning board after one term because I didn't have the time. The time commitment was more than I could handle in those days. I have kids in a young business, and it's a tremendous commitment that you have made. And I just want you to know it. I truly appreciate it. I think the whole town does. So my first point is, with that background, the assertion that this company would intentionally play fast and loose with the regulations and bylaws of this town is not credible, to say the least. We're deeply invested in Manchester. We've done hundreds of projects. I think at our recent 25th anniversary, we figured we've done about 600 projects altogether, and many dozens, if not 100, have been in Manchester. I've been to the zoning board, I've been to the planning board, I've been to the conservation commission, I've been to the historical commission, I've been to the board of health. And we've never had an issue, anything like this one. And feel free to ask anyone in town. We have a reputation for that reason. We take this very seriously. So I want to push back on those assertions. I understand your concern. I totally understand your concern about intent and your concern about the number of these changes. I'm not comfortable with it. I'm frustrated at that. But I want to set the context here as to our company and how this is played out. This is not how we do business. We couldn't be in business for 27 years if we intentionally did those things. Having said that, we did make mistakes, and I think we've discussed it already tonight. I don't have to elaborate on it. The 2 or 3 have been discussed here. Those are mistakes we made, and I sincerely want to express to the board my personal apology, because I've been on this board. I know how precious your time is. I know how difficult these issues can be. It was never our intent in any of this to deceive or to take advantage of a situation. It's just not how we do things. And I realize, again, we made some mistakes, but they were honest, good faith mistakes. And I could speak at length and passionately about this, but I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
No, just a comment. The reputation of this firm is impeccable. Okay, that's why I find this particular application so troubling. And the reason and why we're here, I find very troubling. And having sat on this board for a couple of years, 3 years, 3.5, I don't know, I've lost track. There seems to be a tendency of, and we've heard the term about begging for forgiveness. And this seemed to just fall into that category, this particular, I'm not saying this would happen, it just seems to be prevailing kind of situation lately. Okay, and Michael, the same thing to you. I didn't mean to, impugn the dignity of the company. It's just there were death by 100 cuts. Okay, there was just an awful lot that transpired here that I found very troubling. So the phone calls that I used to get for parking situations, and you and I spoke about that as well. So that's all I have to say. And I just don't want to set. There's a precedent here that I'm afraid I want to nip in the bud going forward with other applications. Sorry that you guys have to be the whipping boy here. Okay, but there seems to be a pervasive attitude that I think
Brian.
Well, I agree with you. This is a real problem that we've had.
agree with me, that's the problem.
No, that's the problem, but we can both have that now. That we have had a real problem with applicants being dishonest, with them overbuilding, with them saying they're gonna do one thing and doing another. This has been a very serious problem that we've had recently for whatever reason. That said, I don't know, these guys obviously messed up, but they're owning it. They tore down a bunch of the stuff they built. They reduced it back to scale and what, I don't think we have the power to find them. What more can we do? I mean, I am as displeased as you are with the way this has unfolded, and I don't get the sense that the people that work for the company are super pleased either. So I think that I think they messed up, but they said
Begging for forgiveness.
they did a great job begging for forgiveness, but also we can't put the fact that a bunch of other people violated our orders all on them.
I don't disagree. And may I speak, you're supposed to be speaking.
Yeah, we're supposed to be speaking to you, Sarah, sorry.
I just want the message to go forth, that we're not going, that we're
Right.
going to, we're gonna look at this very hard and very seriously.
Well,
The fact that there was a lot of money spent by this applicant, okay, to bring it into compliance.
Right, I
Okay.
think that's an important point.
Is important, and
we
a
could have
message that
required
is sent,
that.
that a message that was sent,
Mhm,
and we would have required that,
right,
okay? That's it. So to your point, no hard feelings.
Appreciate that. Yeah, and I think that's the distinction I was hoping to make. I know you're having a hard time believing that we could make a mistake like that. But it was. They literally did not think they were getting away with something. They thought it was okay to do that because they were hyper focused on the block coverage number. And missed that they were crossing over the threshold. Honestly missed it, and they wouldn't be in the company if
No,
they weren't honest. No one's trying to get away with anything.
Sean?
The only thought that I had, going off of what they were saying, was that we also have an obligation to the people that are around them. That when we make these decisions and that we also take them in consideration whenever we make a decision on all our plans, and that we consider how they affect the people around them. When these kind of things happen, we have to take into consider it affected the other people. Not
Right.
just them, but they had, yes, these people took on a hardship of the financial, but that was a choice they also made.
Yeah, I agree
So-
with you, Sean, except for the fact that, we're here to determine whether at this point in time, based on the changes made, whether it brings it substantially in compliance with the special permit. That's all we're here for. We're not here to slap people's knuckles,
No.
to tell people, I agree there's a problem in town that neighbors should not have to bring this type of thing forward. that as a town, we need to have more staffing in our building department in order to be able to keep abreast of projects that are going on.
I think we just need people to be honest about what they're doing. You know,
Steve, probably if people make a mistake,
well, that's true.
that's not honesty.
That's
And
true,
people do
but-
make mistakes, and I think that we struggle so much with the bylaws, so much with the cases that come before us. How can we expect everyone else in town understand what they're supposed to be doing?
No, I agree.
We-
Honest
we
mistakes
need-
are made, but
we
then there's
need-
also,
We need more oversight on the big
Gotcha,
project.
right there.
And a butter should not have to come forward. We should have known.
Mhm.
We should have known that the pool house went up and it was too big. Well, we didn't. Because nobody in town looked at the ongoing project. And I think that's what we can change going forward to eliminate some of these.
well, and I think to Brian's, point earlier, had the remediation not been done voluntarily, I think we would have required it.
But
And I think that, anyone that's listening to this is hearing that now, right? So I don't know how many people are on there, but
That point, 3 months ago, we were, in kind of conversations, not open meeting law violations. But, I think that was where we were leaning.
but the changes have been made,
And now,
and here we are.
Madam Chair, can I just say a concluding thing on behalf of the petitioner, because it sounds like we're reaching near the end of the substantive points. Thank you. You said that the town needs more oversight. You are the oversight.
no, we're not.
No, you are.
No.
The statutory appeal is asking you to oversee and overturn the lack of enforcement by the zoning enforcement officer. No one deserves a mulligan here. I appreciate everything that was said about the long, history of Carpenter and McNeil in the town. They don't deserve a mulligan. All the Burns and the neighbors are asking for is that everybody be held to the same standard, that the rules be followed. And as I said before, that where there are still discrepancies that exist between the special permit plans and what's been built, and again, we still haven't seen certified as-built for this project, which the board should demand before it makes any decision, that hold the applicant accountable. You're talking about, well, the public will see that we kind of gave these applicants a hard time. No, the decision is in front of you and you have a legal duty to make the right decision under the law, which is that this applicant should be required to submit an amendment to its special permit for the things it wants to do. And on the topographical change, the evidence is clear based on what Mr. American said, that just on the stone walls themselves, that they hit both of the triggers in question, that you can't have more than 20 cubic yards of additional fill or moved fill or disturbed ground. And just on the stone walls themselves, that has been clearly exceeded. And the disturbance of the setback area, which is set at 10%, has been well exceeded just on the stone walls. And there's no reasonable debate that those are excluded activities. So I hope the board doesn't ignore the fact that that is a clear violation of the bylaws. And the bylaws say that anyone that engages in those activities must receive a special permit from the planning board. Mr. Orlando said in an email on December 9th that I have also directed the Smiths to the planning board as to the amount of fill. What has happened with that?
Thank you, Mr. Timon. Mr. Orlando issued a subsequent order,
Okay,
and he feels that they comply with 6.16. So we don't need to rehash.
well, the question that's in front of the ZBA is, are you or are you not going to direct your zoning enforcement officer to require that the bylaws be fulfilled on this clear violation, which means that they have to go and try to get a special permit from the planning board? And it sounds like the ZBA is just going to wash its hands of that. And if you do, you're respectfully stepping away from your legal responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Timon. You don't need to tell us what our obligation is.
Just because we disagree with the argument doesn't mean we're washing our hands.
And I think that with respect to the walls, it certainly is not contemplated that that's included in topography, because if it were, any single person in town who wanted to build a stone wall would need a special permit from the planning department. And I don't think that, planning board, I don't think that is what's intended. How many stone walls are there out there? I mean, that's not a topographical change. And the only reason they're excluded from structures is because they're allowed to be in the setback.
I mean, yeah, but the building inspector has determined that they're in compliance with the topographical issues.
Good with that.
He's the authority, yeah.
Okay. Other discussion?
Move to vote.
Second.
Now,
Boiling.
so this is the complicating, the confusing, confusing part of the whole thing. In order to approve the appeal and say that the property owner has not conformed, 4 people need to support that. If we deny the appeal, only 2 people need to support the denial, because that would leave 3 for the approval. And I'm inclined to make a motion to deny the appeal. Do people understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Do you understand, Sean? Ryan?
Well, I think maybe, yeah, I think.
It's a
we're
long run.
Okay. I move to close the public hearing for the application of Benjamin B. Timon, attorney, on behalf of Samuel and Tracy Byrne of 1 to 3 Blossom Lane, and take the following action with respect to the appeal of an administrative decision under section 7.4.5 of the zoning bylaw regarding a request for zoning enforcement filed with building inspector on June 21st, 2022 for construction in progress, which appears to exceed the scope of the special permit granted in 2019 and the building permit issued in August of 2020. At 2 Blossom Lane, assessors map number 17, lot number 12 in District E, filed with the town clerk on August 8th, 2022. I move to deny the appeal and uphold the enforcement officer's administrative decision, including the exchanges agreed to by the property owners for the following portions of the construction project, based on a finding that the as-built condition is substantially consistent with the relief granted in the 2019 special permit and the building permit issued in August of 2022. Ready? Garage with respect to side setback, rear setback, and roof height, based on a finding the dimensions are consistent with the 2019 special permit granted, and the design is consistent with the approved August 2020 building permit, neither of which were appealed. Second, house with respect to front setback, rear setback, and roof height, based on a finding the dimensions are consistent with the 2019 special permit, and the east second floor deck and design, which are consistent with the approved August 2020 building permit, neither of which was appealed. Third, coverage by structures of 29.52%, based on a finding that the coverage is less than the 29.8% that was granted in the 2019 special permit. Fourth, total coverage by structures and impervious surfaces of 32.6%, based on a finding that the coverage is less than the 35% granted in the 2019 special permit. Fifth, The stone wall and iron fence surrounding the property based on a finding, they were depicted on the plans included in the 2019 special permit and are not required to be included in a special permit. It's not relief required under a special permit. Swimming pool based on a finding, the 18 by 40 foot size is not material different from the 18 by 36 foot swimming pool granted in the 2019 special permit, and an 18 by 40 foot pool was reflected in the plans included in the August 2020 building permit. The spa based on a finding that the property owner has agreed to remove the spa as it was located within the setback and such relief was not requested in the 2019 special permit. The pool shed based on the new design, reducing the size to not exceed 197 square feet. Based on a finding, it is not substantially different from the 180 square foot granted in the 2019 special permit, provided the structure does not encroach into the setback. Has a roof height of no more than 2.5 feet, 12 feet 3 inches, and the chimney does not extend more than 2.5 feet above the roof. And provided an application for a building permit is filed if required and approved by the building inspector and is constructed strictly in accordance with PS 2.00 prepared by Carpenter McNeil dated 12/12/2022. Since the pool shed relief was granted under the 2019 special permit, which was not appealed, it is now moot whether it should have been a variance or a special permit. Finally, topographical changes made to the property which may have exceeded those allowed under excluded activity based on a finding the enforcement officer issued an administrative order to the property owner on December 13, 2022, to which the property owner responded with proposed changes and remediation. And the enforcement officer determined that those changes, that they will meet the requirements of section 6.16 of the zoning bylaw and do not require a special permit from the planning board. The administrative decision was not appealed. I have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Brian?
No, nothing substantive.
Okay. Are we ready to vote to deny the appeal of the administrative decision?
Yes, we're ready to vote.
Okay, Catherine,
Denied. Is that what I'm supposed to say?
are you going to deny?
Yes, I'm voting to deny.
Okay. Jim,
Voting to deny.
Brian, Sean,
No.
Voting to deny or voting to?
Not to deny.
you're not gonna deny it, okay, and I vote to deny it. So 4 people have denied it versus 1 not, so it's denied.
Thank you all for your time.
I guess I'll write this, you would like to review it.
I can review it, so.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on.
Did you close the meeting?
No.
Public? No.
Oh, yes, both public hearings were closed.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're now moving on to administrative matters.
Nothing? Okay, well,
Blake. Oh, we don't know what we're executive. No, we're not. in executive.
We're just finishing the meeting, the open meeting. Thank you. We have two sets of minutes to review. November 16th and December 21st. I sent Gail a slight change to November 16th today because the name of the attorney for Mr. Cardarelli was misspelled.
Mr. Cotterelli was spelled properly.
Yes, but the attorney's name was Heney, not Henny. So I sent that to Gail.
It's been edited.
Thank you. Any comments? So November 16th meeting, everyone here can vote.
Why are the highlights in it?
Those are the edits that these are amended minutes. You approved them at the last meeting. They've been amended. That highlighted section is an amendment.
It was inaccurate.
Oh,
It didn't clearly state that we determined that we didn't have the ability to
I'm not sure what that attributed specifically to me, but that's fine. I mean, I guess I did say
Yeah,
that.
you did say
I
that.
did say that.
Yeah,
But I don't know that I determined it, but I did say that.
concluded.
Yeah.
So are we good with the November 16th minutes?
Yes.
Take a vote.
Captain, we good?
Yeah, we're okay, Ryan.
Catherine,
Yeah, approved.
James,
Approved.
Brian,
Approved.
John,
Approved.
and Sarah said approved. Okay. These are amended minutes. Okay, December 21st minutes. Brian, Sean, and I can vote on
Oh, here, yeah.
that.
You weren't here either?
I wasn't
No.
here.
It's August birthday.
So they were very brief. They were the 15 Lincoln Ave and the continuation of the Two Blossom Lane.
Good for me.
So we're ready to vote on them?
Yep.
I move to approve the minutes of December 21st. Have a second?
Second.
Second, okay. Sean? Brian?
Approved.
And Sarah approved.
That was a tough call. That was a tough
Okay.
call.
Offense on that one.
I'm looking back at the other vote. I should have one of the other.
I was wondering why you didn't.
I should have, in hindsight. My ass.
You were arguing.
Huh?
You were arguing.
I was, but I just, when it was all said and done, they got to where I wanted them to be.
Right, that's the
They
problem,
did,
yeah.
they did. That was.
Where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And everything else was just white noise. as far as
Tragic,
I was
yeah.
concerned.
Right.
I think a lot of it was because of 3 years of construction and neighbors being inconvenienced.
Right.
So. Gail,
Yes,
our next meeting, are we doing 3:15? Are we skipping 3:1?
that's what you did. That's what you requested.
And you've notified the application you received?
I have,
Okay,
and he was fine.
okay, so our next meeting will be March 15th. What I said before, whether I said April or March, but we're not meeting in
22nd.
February. Because I had originally switched the February meeting to March 1st, but then it's so close to the 15th that we decided that didn't make sense. Okay,
March 15th.
Nice. Having said that.
Yeah.
Being prepared, I got a letter, I forgot to bring with me, a letter of resignation. However,
Were you ever here?
well, that's debatable. In the letter, it would state that I was, my resignation, and I would stay on it as maybe an alternate until the position was filled. I
okay,
would be willing, on the other hand, to stay on as an alternate. You could just, and not go through the service process,
okay, when is your term up?
25. I just got reappointed
Okay,
this past summer.
so that means that I would,
Whatever's easy for you.
yeah, it means I would request the select board to make Sean a full
What the hell
member
did you just get me into?
Yep.
and Brian an alternate. Okay,
And if that doesn't,
Do I not have a say in this?
you move right along.
Yeah. It's
Well,
funny
that's,
how that works.
You know, I mean, as an alternate, if what, time is just starting to come, and well, you know, how many boards do you still on?
right, yeah, too many.
But,
3.
for one night a month, potentially one night a month, and you go to a couple of site visits,
Okay,
it's not gonna be a hardship.
okay,
And the select board and the Infinite Wisdom wants me off,
okay.
I guess I would have to abstain.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay. I'll look into that.
What's your call?
My husband really wants me to resign, but I know, I don't know who would get to take my place, so we'll
Well, I
see.
got someone lined up that was gonna take my place.
Do you? Well, let's talk
Well,
after this.
Well, we have to post it.
I think that what we need to do is the June 30th. Can you last until June 30th?
Okay, I can try. What happens on June 30th?
March, April, May, 4 more meetings.
It looks like she checked out tonight.
Terms are up.
I did a great job tonight.
Terms,
Wait,
terms are up on June 30th. So, and Jim Dietrich's term is up.
Jim wants off too, doesn't he?
Yeah, but he kind of vacillated when I talked to him at the site visit,
I
so.
mean, you know, Sarah, I only signed back on to
Right,
see through
do
the,
the 40B.
to see through the 40B.
So I think that what we should do is to, for June 30th, is to advertise the ZBA is looking for members.
Okay,
Okay,
and then if we got enough.
And
okay,
see how many people
that's great.
Yeah.
Let's
come
see if we can
forward
get some good-
and then we can,
And then if we've got a goodly amount of people,
Yeah.
then I'll resign.
Yeah.
Since we're having the conversation, my term ends June 30th too.
oh, are you gonna stay on?
I really can't. As much as I. want.
All right, so
Oh,
maybe.
I
maybe
want to
can
join that
say-
crowd. I can't either.
Well, you don't have, you're.
Pile on.
Maybe I can stay out a little. I don't want to leave the town in a terrible position,
I'm
but.
gonna be the only one.
But-
No,
But let's see the apple, let's see the apple.
I'm gonna be
let's-
ill. Let's see
I don't-
what June 30th comes up
Let's
with.
see what June 30th
Why don't
brings,
we,
because I'm not gonna leave the town in a terrible
Okay,
position,
so
but I
let me-
also, you know, have
Go,
kids and
go out now.
find some people on the street.
No, let's start
Go to the
advertising
Legion.
the ZBA now.
Go to the Legion, go to the
Okay.
Bluebird, someone will be there.
We'll start
Sign us the paper.
advertising, the ZBA now, and see what we get.
I'm of the same mind as Catherine, that I don't want to leave the town on a lurch, but
Okay.
I think the sooner you put it out there, the
Okay.
more
You have
candidates we
to.
might.
You know, when I was
I'm
elected.
sure after
I
the
was-
40B, everyone's gonna want to come on.
I know, because that looked like so much fun,
Well,
and
yeah,
everything
you-
else we've done
I didn't
recently.
resign right after the election was because I wanted to see the 40B through,
Me too.
Yeah.
and then I wanted to see this through.
When my term was up, I felt like I could, you know, in the middle of 40.
So are we ready to?
No, we don't have,
adjourn?
no,
Well,
John
I
Benares,
think that part of the appeal of joining right now is that it's not going to be 40.
That's all I want to know now.
What, Sean, what do you want?
When is my term up? That's all I want to know.
Never.
20, 30.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
I.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, if you didn't hear me earlier, you did a fabulous job on this
Okay.
tonight.
Um,
That was extremely thorny.
tell the guy,